Ever feel like you're just swimming in information? Try and find that clear signal, that one thing that makes sense of it all.
Yeah, we definitely get that.
And that's what we do here. Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex topics, look at the sources explaining them, and really try to boil it down to the core insights for you.
Basically, your shortcut to understanding the important stuff.
Exactly. And today we're tackling a really critical piece of the U.S. national security world, the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. You'll hear it called the NCSC.
hmm And we've looked at sources covering, its history, its mission, how that's maybe changed its structure, and the key people involved over the years.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive, pretty straightforward. Figure out what the NCSC actually is, why we have it, and where it fits in the whole U.S. government puzzle.
Okay, so where do we start? The beginning seems logical.
Yeah, let's do that. Our sources point to a specific date. January 5th, 2001. That's when President Clinton issued a presidential directive, PDD 75.
Right. And that directive created two things: the National Counterintelligence Executive, the NCIX, and the office supporting that role, ONCIX, the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive.
But importantly, that wasn't day one for U.S. counterintelligence, was it?
No, not at all. It's interesting. ONCIX actually took over from something called the National Counterintelligence Center.
Which was formed back in 1994.
Exactly. And the reason that center was formed, well, it was a direct result of a pretty major spy case, Aldrich Ames.
The CIA operative caught spying for Russia?
Right. His case really exposed some serious vulnerabilities. It showed why a dedicated counterintelligence focus was needed.
A tough lesson for sure. Okay, so Clinton creates NCIX and ONCIX in 2001. What were they trying to fix specifically?
Well, the main idea, it seems, was better coordination.
Yeah.
You had different agencies involved in counterintelligence, and they needed a central point for advice and strategy.
Like getting the whole team reading from the same playbook?
Sort of, yeah. So they set up these boards, the National Counterintelligence Board of Directors and the National CI Policy Board, to advise the NCIX.
Okay.
And this whole setup, it wasn't just a policy memo. It was later put into law by the Counterintelligence Enhancement Act of 2002. Gave it a more permanent footing.
Got it. So we have the structure taking shape in the early 2000s, but then came 9/11 and everything changed. Our sources highlight the 2004 Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act, IRTPA. That sounds like a big deal.
Oh, it was massive. The IRTPA came straight out of the 9/11 Commission's recommendations. One of the biggest takeaways from 9/11 was the need for much better intelligence sharing and coordination.
Breaking down those silos between agencies.
Exactly. And a key part of IRTPA was creating the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI.
The DNI.
Right.
The person meant to oversee the entire intelligence community, right?
That's the job. And IRTPA specifically placed both the NCIX and ONCIX within the ODNI.
Ah, okay. So they went from being maybe slightly separate entities to being formally integrated under this new DNI structure.
Precisely. The goal was unified oversight. But the evolution didn't stop there. Fast forward to November 2014.
What happened then? Another reorganization.
Yep. The Director of National Intelligence at the time decided to further integrate things. Basically, they took ONCIX and merged it with several other security-focused centers.
Which ones?
Our sources mentioned the Center for Security Evaluation, think security clearances and practices, the Special Security Center, and, importantly, the National Insider Threat Task Force.
Insider threats, like leaks or employees causing harm.
Exactly. So merging ONCIX, which focused on external threats, with entities focused on security practices and internal threats, they created the NCSC.
The National Counterintelligence and Security Center, combining both sides of the coin, almost.
That seemed to be the logic. Create a single place to handle both counterintelligence and security, integrating those efforts for, better synergy.
And so with the creation of NCSC, the old ONCIX name disappeared.
Correct. ONCIX as a distinct office ceased to exist, and the person leading it, the NCIX, became the director of the new NCSC.
Makes sense. A move towards consolidation.
Consolidation and integration. That's really the key theme there. Okay, so before NCSC was officially formed in 2014, what was ONCIX doing? What was its core mission back then?
Well, the sources say ONCIX was really focused on boosting U.S. counterintelligence, both the actual efforts and just general awareness, making sure that different parts of the government understood the threats.
Threats from, like, foreign spies, terrorist groups.
Exactly. Foreign intelligence services, terrorists, even other non-state groups. ONCIX was meant to help understand, assess, and ultimately counter their activities against the U.S.
Okay, and did it have more specific jobs listed?
It did. The sources lay out a few key objectives for ONCIX. Things like actively trying to defeat hostile intelligence operations.
Going on the offense sometimes.
Seems like it. Also, protecting the integrity of the U.S. intelligence system itself, making sure it wasn't compromised.
Crucial.
Providing good, actionable intelligence to policymakers. Protecting vital national assets, think critical infrastructure or sensitive technology. And specifically countering spying aimed at the U.S. military.
It's a pretty wide range of responsibility.
Definitely. And the head of ONCIX, the NCIX, also had another important role, chairing the National Counterintelligence Policy Board.
Right, we mentioned that board earlier. What was its significance again?
Our sources describe it as the main interagency group for setting national CI policies. So the NCIX was really in a central position to shape the overall direction of U.S. counterintelligence strategy.
Got it. Steering the ship, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, an interesting point is that ONCIX itself didn't usually issue warnings directly to, say, private companies about threats.
Oh, how did that work then?
It seems they relied on collaboration. They worked closely with the FBI, specifically their ANISAR program, which does outreach to industry, and also with the State Department's OSA, Overseas Security Advisory Council, and the CIA. The idea was that ONCIX coordinated the intelligence, and these other agencies helped get the warnings out.
So more interconnectedness. It wasn't just ONCIX operating in a vacuum.
Exactly. And another example of that collaboration, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, the satellite imagery folks, actually had their counterintelligence office physically located within ONCIX.
Wow. Okay. So really close ties there. Now, what about the people who've actually led these organizations? We have some names, right?
We do. Let's run through the timeline from our sources.
Right.
Back in August 2006, Joel F. Brenner was appointed NCIX. He also had this title, Mission Manager for Counterintelligence.
Okay. And after him?
In September 2009, Robert Bear Bryant took over as NCIX.
Bear Bryant. Okay.
Then, a significant figure, William Evanina, he became NCIX in May 2014, just before the big reorganization.
Right, the one that created NCSC.
Exactly. And his tenure is interesting because in 2015, Congress actually changed the law to make the NCIX position soon to be the NCSC director role subject to Senate confirmation.
Elevating its status.
Yeah.
Making it a more public-facing, politically vetted role.
Seems so. And Evanina was formally appointed as the first Senate-confirmed director of NCSC in 2018.
Okay. Who followed him?
After Evanina left in early 2021, Michael Orlando stepped in as acting director.
No.
Then, in September 2023, Michael C. Casey was sworn in as the director.
And the latest update.
Our sources mention Mark Fraunfelter being named acting director in January 2025.
Okay. Quite a few transitions in recent years.
Yeah. And it's crucial to remember all these leaders, whether NCIX or NCSC director, report up to the Director of National Intelligence, reinforces that whole OD&I coordination structure we talked about.
Absolutely. It really shows how the job's importance, or at least its formal recognition, has grown. Okay, let's talk structure again. The NCSC today, based on our sources, we know it combined ONCIX with those other centers.
Right. The Center for Security Evaluation, the Special Security Center, and the National Insider Threat Task Force, all rolled into one NCSC.
To create that unified approach to counterintelligence and security.
Exactly. External threats, internal risks, security practices, all under one roof, theoretically.
Now, there's a mention in the sources about Title 32 of the Code of Federal Regulations, and it connects to two other big centers. The National Counterproliferation Center, NCPC.
Dealing with WMD?
Right, stopping the spread of weapons of mass destruction, and the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC.
Okay. Are these part of NCSC?
Well, that's the thing. The sources don't explicitly say they are part of NCSC, but mentioning them in a similar regulatory context suggests they exist within that same OD&I framework.
So, like sister organizations maybe working alongside NCSC under the DNI.
That seems like a reasonable way to think about it. Related, coordinated by OD&I, but distinct entities with their own specific focuses, counterproliferation, counterterrorism, and counterintelligence security for NCSC.
Okay, that clarifies things. So let's try to sum this all up. We've seen the NCSC isn't just one thing that popped up overnight. It evolved.
Definitely. It grew out of earlier efforts, going back to at least the mid-90s, partly spurred by major events like the Aldrich Ames case.
Right. And it went through significant changes, especially after 9/11 with the creation of the ODNI, and then again in 2014 with the merger that actually formed the NCSC we have now.
And its core job is to be the lead for the U.S. government on national counterintelligence, integrating security functions, all operating under the Director of National Intelligence, protecting U.S. secrets, our intelligence system, our assets from foreign spies and other threats.
For me, the connection back to Aldrich Ames is really striking, how one massive failure can force such a fundamental rethink and lead to new organizations.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
How vulnerabilities exposed in the real world directly shape the structures designed to prevent them in the future.
Absolutely. Which leads to a final thought, maybe for you listening. We've seen the NCSC change and adapt over time in response to threats. So given how fast the world keeps changing new technologies, new global tensions, what challenges do you think an organization like NCSC faces now? How does it keep adapting?
Yeah, and how do you balance that need for security, for counterintelligence, with the principles of, an open democratic society? That tension is always there.
Definitely something to think about.